Hey, this is Sandy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athletic trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome back to AT Corner, early morning edition.
This is the earliest we've ever recorded.
So I'm going to try and hold it together because I am not that much of a morning person.
But I am, and we're a little giggly today, so I think it'll make for a good episode.
Well then, I think with that being said, I think we should just roll right into it.
I like how we didn't giggle after we said we're giggly.
I was going to, but then I thought that might sound weird.
Okay, so why don't we, last week, I think we skipped our Things Athletes Said segment. I think we should bring it back.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's do it. So actually, what are we talking about today, Randy?
So today, we're talking about concussion stories.
It's been a while since I actually put together these stories, so honestly, and I didn't order them today, so honestly, I have no clue what's going on in this episode.
Man, we're really shooting from the hip, aren't we?
Yeah, we really are. So let's start. Actually, the things athletes said, and we have also a things coaches said. They're both concussion related. Go ahead and read the first one.
So Kelsey H. sent in, athlete was talking to the assistant coach in class one morning and said, I don't think I can practice. Then quietly whispered, I think I have the C word, if you know what I mean. The coach told him to come talk to me to get some antibiotics. Kid said, really, it works for that? The kid showed up in the athletic training room and told me what he said to coach, and said, so can I get some antibiotics? When I looked at him weird, I said, son, you have to go to the doctor for that issue. He said, you take care of the other guys with the C word. Once I figured it out, I couldn't stop laughing. I told him to go back and ask his coach what the other C word was. Great laugh for all of us.
So the kid had a concussion, did not need antibiotics.
That will not help with concussions.
You know, I do appreciate that the athlete did go to the athletic trainer with that trust.
Yeah, that's true. And he was very open to reporting his concussion.
Yep.
So I think we should do things coaches said now.
Yeah, that last one was kind of athletes and coaches, but this one's definitely something funny a coach said. So Nicole L. emailed us. She actually emailed us a few, so this is a nice teaser. During the fall 2019 semester, my girls' soccer coach was really excited about a new freshman keeper prospect. A day before their first in-season practice session, I learned from her twin sister, who's also on the team, that their family had been hiking a local mountain range and the athlete had climbed up top of a waterfall to take a picture. She slipped and fell over 30 feet, fracturing her femur and wrist, as well as sustaining a concussion.
Oh my goodness.
EMS had to essentially hike a few miles to reach her and bring her to where the helicopter could safely land. Man, that must have taken a while.
Especially sitting there with a fractured femur.
Yeah, of all things, that's crazy. And a concussion. She underwent a procedure for rod placement and had a cast for the wrist on top of therapy for her concussion. The very first question my coach asked when I told him the news, okay, but will she be back at all this season? Like, what's our timeline on getting a robo-leg? Like, come on, coach. How about, is she okay?
You know, yeah, like, that's the part that blows my mind. Like, when you give news like that, like, obviously the coach cares, but then the coach is really straight to the point. It's just like, I feel like that's out of place. Like, I had a kid have a full-blown seizure, needed brain surgery, and not kidding, one of the first questions was, so what timeline are we looking at? Are you serious?
I think coach needs to work on some emotional intelligence.
Oh, big time.
Okay.
But I think we do have to point out, we should ask, was the picture worth it? Like, I'm assuming we were doing it for the gram.
Oh yeah, it was taking a picture, huh?
So I hope, for all of that, I hope they got the picture.
Remember when I took that picture in Hawaii where I was like...
Where everyone was freaking out because it looked like you were hanging off the cliff?
Yeah, I was not hanging off the cliff, but I posted this picture where I was holding on to this, like, what would you call that? Like an old building. And I lifted my legs off, and from the picture you can't see the floor, but you see the beautiful landscape from the view of the hike. And so it just looked like I was like hanging off a cliff, and people were like freaking out when I posted it. I'm not that big of a risk taker, I promise. Okay, let's jump into 2 weird ways to get a concussion.
Ooh.
So Aimee S. said, one of my baseball players while on deck got a concussion when a large fish fell from the sky and hit him in the head, giving him a concussion. The hawk that nested over the dugout dropped it on its way to the box.
Like, what are the odds of that happening?
Insane. It's insane. Because here's the thing, is like, how do you explain that? Like,
hey, sorry, coach. This person's out because a fish got dropped on him.
Fish fell from the sky. You know, that actually happened when I was interning at the high school. No, it was not a fish falling from the sky, but the cheerleaders were running around the outside of the baseball diamond. And it was, I don't even know how, it was just perfect coincidence that one of the cheerleaders was running on the outside just as someone had hit a ball out past the fence, and it just clocked her right in the head.
Ooh, that's unlucky.
Concussion.
That sucks.
Yeah. But really, I mean, she was just running. What are the chances it's gonna make contact?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, next one. Jason B. I was a GA at a high school, and the quarterback also played baseball. Another player hit a homer, and the quarterback standing on the baseball bench in the dugout jumped up and gave himself a concussion.
Oh my goodness.
When I first started reading this, I honestly thought it was the story that I just told.
So, that reminds me, surprisingly, working cross country, I've had more concussions than you would think of. And now, of course, it's not during their sport because it's pretty hard to get a concussion.
While you're running and turning left?
Well, cross country, they turn right sometimes.
Oh, sorry, you said cross country, you're right.
So, the only time they're going to get a concussion is if they're doing something they're not supposed to.
Well, what is it? Pole vault?
Yeah,
and
pole
stick
vault.
themselves in the head. You've had that.
I've had that, that's true. But for one of my cross country runners, they were in the weight room messing around, and one of them jumps up and hits their head on the rack.
Of course.
Yep.
You know, okay, I know this is a concussion episode, and I know this is not a concussion story, but that does remind me, when I was interning at the community college, we had an opposing team come, and they were hanging out. We didn't have... For some reason, they were not in the locker room. They were in our weight room. I don't remember why. Anyway, so they were setting up at the weight room, and one of them was hanging from this really high up, like, pull-up bar. And she thought it would be cool to show off before they played. This is the opposing team. And she jumped up onto that, like, it was like 8 feet off the floor probably, or 9 feet. And she fell, tore her ACL.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Right before they went on to play.
That's a bummer.
Just because she wanted to show off by grabbing the pull-up bar.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Yeah. Okay, this is a long one, and I'm super, super excited to share it. Go ahead and read it.
Alright, so this one's from Valerie D. OMG, I have one of those. This is how rumors get started. Ones. Mortified. So I was 22 when I started my very first high school job. After about a year, I was promoted to head athletic trainer for football of a huge 5A, when 5A was biggest program in West Texas.
I'm glad she wrote that because in California we don't have those. Well, at least I don't know of those sorts of...
We have a different system.
Okay.
We use divisions like Division 1, Division 2, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Total Friday night lights. I was sick to my stomach, nervous every single day of my life that year. Fortunately, I had amazing coaches, and I had the greatest group of football players, which that does make the job so much easier.
I get nervous before football games. But it's a good nervous.
It's just, you're preparing yourself.
Yeah.
All those coaches and all those young men took me in and were very protective of me. They helped with everything that they could, and it was totally awesome. I became friends with the parents of one of my boys, so I knew him well. One Friday night, we are playing at home, and he is in the backfield about to catch a punt return. Oh, effing special teams. Am I right?
Okay, I had a kid last year, not kidding. Every single kickoff, he would get hurt. And like hurt to the point that he couldn't return most of the time. And honestly, I knew, I had to talk to coach, dude, you can't put him in this because he's just gonna get hurt every single time. And so at the end of the season, I mean, of course, he needs to go back in, right? It's kickoff. So I hate kickoff. But anyway, he goes and I remember he came off this, after they did the kickoff, they ran the play. Of course, my eyes are on this kid. And he runs off the sideline and he looks at me and goes, Sandra, I didn't get hurt.
You know, that is always a good goal when you can come back and say, I didn't get hurt.
I was like, yes, thank you. So anyway.
He fumbles the catch, tries to recover, and gets absolutely trucked. It was right in front of me, and no joke, I thought he was killed.
I've had those moments.
I've never been more scared in my life. I never even saw what happened after the play because my team physician and I took off onto the field immediately.
I don't know how to explain that to people who aren't athletic trainers.
What do you mean?
When obviously you have to check the scene, right? That's the very first thing. You got to make sure that no one's around. But your field vision starts to get so fine-tuned that, you're aware of everything that's around you, but also, you just go into action. You just run out and you trust your skills.
Yeah, you just hit a different mode. You don't even think about it. That baby was all the way down. So we got out there and start to eval him, and he is not completely unconscious, but you can tell he is not all there. My doc tries to evaluate him and clear C-spine and all that jazz, when the kid starts to sit up by himself and literally starts swinging at us.
Oh my goodness.
That's bad. I do have something like that after we're done. I'll throw that one out there. It was crazy. We calm him down, and they have driven our med cart onto the field. We get him in the back and take him up to the locker room where we have an x-ray room and an x-ray techs because my doctor still wanted to take pictures.
Wait, what? This is a high school?
Man, they got more resources than some colleges. It was right before halftime, so we actually were up there until everyone came up for half. By that time, my kid is doing better, but he is completely out of it. So I get called outside because his mom is waiting and in hysterics. So my AT partner and I scoop the kid up and take him outside so he can see her. The kid has his arms around me and my partner as we walk outside, and we see his mom and my head football coach and AC. My coach asked him how he is feeling, and he goes, "Oh, I'm all good, coach. It's Friday night, and I'm balling and got my arm around my girl. And I'm living my dream, sir." I almost dropped him. This is obviously how I get fired. I just stood there until his mom literally burst out laughing. Then my coach looks at me and back to the mom and goes, "Well, at least he's happy and feeling better." I was so embarrassed. My doc let him hang around for a few more minutes, but he really was acting a donkey, and it was crazy because this kid was normally the most polite baby of all time. So we sent him home with his mom with specific instructions on how to watch him. That was the first time I ever experienced a total personality change with a concussion. I saw him the next day for treatments, and he nearly started crying when he saw me.
Oh.
His mom told him what had happened, and he was so embarrassed. He is in his 30s now and married with babies of his own. We bring that story up even now, and he still apologizes profusely. It's hilarious now, but geez.
Oh my goodness. Talk about personality change.
I've never seen a personality change like that. I've seen someone later on in their concussion recovery develop depression, but I've never seen an instant personality change like that.
I've seen some personality changes, but something I will say, because I worked a lot of per diem jobs personality change is so hard to detect when you're working per diem, because one of my very favorite things about working as an athletic trainer is that we get to see our patients before they get injured, after they get injured, throughout the whole entire process.
Very unique.
So working per diem was a huge shift for me because I didn't know these athletes before. So when someone was complaining of head injury, it was a lot harder for me to determine some of those non-objective cues.
Yeah. So back to where he started swinging at them. Now, this wasn't a concussion, but it was an altered sense of consciousness.
You've seen this?
Yes. And it was during a cross-country meet. It was during one of a larger meet. And it was a hot day. So we had the cold tubs for any heat illness stuff. And this one kid, they were trying to put him in because he had the signs of getting close to heat stroke. And he was totally combative. He did not want to go in the water. He was pushing everyone away. It's crazy to see how that happens.
I know we talked about the 2 C-spines I've had last football season, but one of them, actually it was the first one, immediately, I knew the kid, I think it was it was either a complete cervical flexion or a complete lateral flexion of his neck. That's the reason why we ran out. And he went unconscious. And I almost feel like he did some positioning, but I can't remember. It was a while back. Anyway, so we ran out and he was unconscious, but then by the time that we ran out to him, he had tried to, he just ripped off his helmet. And so he still had his shoulder pads on. So if you think, he's lying on his back, and he has his shoulder pads on, so his neck is now in extension, or it would be, except that I was already stabilizing him. So it really put me in an awkward position because, in school they teach you how to stabilize with the helmet and shoulder pads, and then how to take off the equipment, but not really. You're not really going to see someone without a helmet. That's a weird thing.
Yeah.
So for me, I ended up using my knees to help stabilize because I was there for 20 minutes. That was the long one. So I can't imagine holding his head with just my arms. And he was combative. I remember that he also had a concussion. But he didn't remember the play. He didn't understand why he was laying down. He didn't understand why we were holding his head. He didn't understand why his chin was bleeding. He kept touching his chin. He kept trying to get up. And of course, I'm holding his head, and I hold his shoulders, and I use my forearms on his head. So that also took extra strength to try to hold him down, and luckily,
especially when they're trying to move and get up.
Yeah, I remember that my former preceptor who I was working with that night, she literally had to hold him. So it was just...
That's crazy.
Yeah. Talk about personality change. He was getting quite aggressive. You want to go to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this one's from Bob T. He said, first game at a new school and last for the other AT. Biggest rival on the schedule. 7,000 plus in attendance.
That's going to be a fun environment.
Oh, yeah. End of third quarter, somebody gets me and says a player's having difficulty breathing. The player was our punter. Doesn't play any other position. He's hyperventilating on the bench. So I do the usual calm him down things. The team doc comes over and he checks him out. He calms down and we carry on. Then there are about 4 minutes left in the game, and this kid starts again, this time worse. Doc says, it's okay, actually, why don't we let him pass out because it will help him reset. The other AT was also a respiratory therapist, and she agrees, which I've never heard of that.
But it does kind of make sense. I wouldn't think to do that, but it does kind of just reset everything.
No, I was talking about the AT being a respiratory therapist. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's cool too.
But yeah, that's honestly, if I were on my own, I don't know that I would have thought to.
It makes you feel better when your doctor says that.
And the other AT who's a respiratory therapist.
Exactly. So you can feel confident in this decision.
Yeah. So the kid passes out, the breathing gets better, but he doesn't come to.
Oh my goodness.
By this time, the game's done, the ambulance left already, and 7,000 people are leaving, and this kid is still passed out on the bench. So the ambulance has to work their way back in, and then they take him to the hospital. Next day, the coach comes into the office and says, I need to come look at game film with him. Apparently, the kid had a concussion. The coach showed me a clip after he shagged a punt badly, and in the corner of the screen, you can see him bashing his forehead with his own helmet. And this was my baptism into the AT field.
You see, and it's one of those things, like, total overreaction by the kid. Like, why were you doing this? It's like those people who, like, punch the wall.
So, oh my goodness, yeah. But you know what? This is crazy. This is also, it's a really good point that, you know, you can have really great field vision, but, you know, there are 11 people on the field. Plus, if you have to, like last season, I was in charge of all 22 people on the field every game.
And I was going to say, that's not including the people on the sidelines, which
And this kid was on the sideline.
Have a kid that's upset, hurting himself on the sideline, you may not see that.
Yeah, especially if you're the only AT on your sideline. Man, that's just... I'm glad he had a team doc.
Oh, thank goodness.
All right. So Eileen B said, once at a high school, I was doing a concussion eval on a football player. Mid-conversation, another player walked by with a pool noodle, not knowing what we were doing, and whacked the concussed player over the head with it.
Nothing worse than that.
You're like, what? You, like, probably in that moment, there's nothing, you can't even stop it. It probably happened way too quick. I wonder, that kid probably felt so bad after. At least it was a pool noodle and not like a textbook.
Yeah, that's true. At least it was something softer and very pliable.
Oh, this one's about TikTok.
Oh, this is very relevant for nowadays.
So Nicole L, here's another one from her. I love this one. At the expense of the athletes. Whoops. During the fall 2019 semester, 2 volleyball girls came into my office asking to be evaluated for concussion.
At least they were honest.
Yeah, that's awesome that they came to her. That is great. I assumed that they must have collided on the court as their game had started 5 minutes prior. But when I asked how their mutual impact had happened, they looked sheepish and kept repeating, "We just hit our heads."
Oh, immediately guilty. They did something they weren't supposed to, for sure.
You're like, do I need to do some digging? I found out later that evening from a livid coach that the girls were making a TikTok in the locker room a few minutes prior to their home game and smashed their heads together in the process. The 2 starters were both out for the game and did not return for over a month due to vestibular issues. I hope they at least posted the TikTok.
I was going to say, I hope the TikTok went viral for them.
Yeah, don't let it flop.
Yeah, please don't let that one flop.
You're like, do you know what went behind this? So this next one's from Gabby L.
Gabby!
I was covering my first football game at a new school I had just transferred to. It was way northern Washington, basically Canada. I was nervous to make such a big trip for my first solo game. Mind you, the high school we were playing didn't have an AT, so I'd be covering both teams on my own, which added to my anxiety a bit.
Ooh, that's tough. You just talked about that.
Yeah, perfect segue. Anyways, we made it up to the school at some point because our bus had broke down on the way.
Ooh.
Fast forward.
That sucks.
Yeah, it does. Fast forward to game time, and we're in the second quarter. One of my kids comes running over to me and says someone's hurt, but there was already a play going on. So I go over to one of our coaches who's with the kid, and he said something's wrong with him. Apparently, he couldn't remember where we were or even who I was, although he figured it out after intensely staring at me for a while. He said he could remember where he was, but had no clue how we got there or how he was even in his football gear. At that point, I started checking Perla and vitals. Good job, Gabby.
Yeah, nice.
That's from Pam's rotation. Pam drilled that in us. I had minimal interaction with this kid prior and had never seen him so giddy before. All things checked out, and he even did well on his scat, which was hard to complete because I was literally the only one covering the game. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's tough.
Man, scats take so freaking long, and especially like the the company policies that I was working per diem, every time someone had complained of a head injury or head pain or something, I'd have to do a scat. And when you're the only one on that sideline, it is so difficult.
It's very tedious.
Well, yeah, and having your eyes, first of all, working on your field vision and having your eyes on the kid, making sure
you're counting the errors.
Man, it is rough. So, kudos to you, Gabby. His memory started to come back, and he was remembering the bus breaking down, but was still having trouble with remembering what happened when we got there. Obviously, he was removed from the game. I told him specifically to not move from the treatment table. He must stay there so I can periodically check his vitals and whatnot, and put one of his non-playing teammates in charge of him. I've had to do this. Last year when I was, during football season, I was, again, the only one on the sideline, and I think it was youth football, and someone went down, and so I went out, and then he had a head injury, so then I took him to my sideline, was checking him out, and then someone else went down, and so I told him not to move. Well then, so I went over, the other kid had a head injury too, so then now I have 2 scats to do.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So then I went over and I'm trying to, work on the one while still monitoring. Time is a thing. You have to be mindful that you're not taking too long with these things as well. And you're monitoring like when it happened and whatnot. So I went back and the first kid is gone. So then I'm like, what?
Where'd he go?
So I look and he's about to play the next.
Oh my goodness.
So then I went to the ref who was on the sideline right next to me and I was like, wait, no. That kid, I'm evaluating him for a head injury. He can't be in there right now. And so the ref did the whole whistle. He paused the play. And then the coach, who I didn't know, this is my first time working with that team. It was a per diem event. He got so pissed at me. And I was like, this kid I'm evaluating for a head injury. And so then the ref had to back me up, luckily. And honestly, I'm glad that I didn't know this ahead of time, but later in that game was that game, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but it was the game that the other team and their fans were so aggressive that the, what do you call it?
The league, like the youth league.
The youth league had to call the police because things were getting too rowdy, and they grabbed the coach at the end of the game, grabbed the ref, and was about to like punch him. And so there were already problems with this league before, or with this team, and I did not know that. So I mean, I'm glad that I didn't know that because it made my job standing up for the kid a lot easier.
Oh yeah,
I wasn't scared for like my own health and
your self-being.
Yeah. So anyway, we got the kid out and I was able to evaluate both of them. That was really terrifying afterward, learning that that team had a history of like violence. So later I was like, please, like, I don't want them to know what car I drive. I don't want them to know, like, I don't want them to see me out of here. Like, that was really terrifying to me.
Man. Does anyone else have this youth football experience? Because it got real fast.
Yeah, it was taking a really big toll on my mental health. So I'm glad I'm not in that situation anymore. But you know what? I will say, I'm not going to say where this was, and I'm not going to say anything about anything that gives it away. But the company that did contract me to that certain event was so supportive in getting me out of there. So I was very, very thankful to them and very grateful that they had my back.
That's all you can ask.
So anyway, back to Gabby's story. Sorry, Gabby, I'm hijacking your story. Where did I leave off? So I would turn around to check on him every so often, where I would catch him trying to sneak away, of course. At one point, he was laughing hysterically, and I asked what was so funny, and his teammate told me that he wanted to pretend to have a seizure to see how I would react.
Not funny.
Freaking nuts that kid was, but he's also one of my favorites now. The jokesters, man. We made it home, and I was able to contact his dad to come pick him up, despite the time of night it was, And even though he was trying to drive himself home with friends. No, that's a no.
Yeah, it's a big no.
When he checked in with me that following Monday at school, he said he went to a UW football game the next day and completely felt fine. I was baffled. He did great on his scat as well, but I wanted to wait another day before giving him the impact. Despite him feeling completely fine, it took him about 3 times to pass his impact test, all taken days apart. But he managed to do it and only missed 1 game. How he made a quick recovery blows my mind, but he was back in school with no issues and progressed through the return to play protocol with no issues. I still hold the faking seizure thing against him, but he just laughs about it. But that was my experience covering my first football game on my own. Oh, that was her first football game?
Well, welcome to the job.
Wow, that is just crazy.
Oh, that's funny. But you know what? It also previews what we talked to Dr. Kateras about in our next episode about how individual concussions are.
Oh yeah. With a lot of things, but especially with concussion.
Yes.
So the next one's from Jen K. She, at the end of every email, she's like, "Are you tired of my stories yet?" And I'm like,
"No.
We're just getting started. We are never tired of your stories."
We love the stories.
I know that she's got a ton of stories up her sleeve, so Jen, keep them coming. So she wrote in saying, "This concussion story is interesting for a couple of reasons. It happened right when the concussion protocols were starting to change significantly," which is crazy.
Of course.
"It happened to a track athlete.
Even better.
It happened to one of my coach's children. And all that being said, here's the story. This is maybe 4 weeks before our regional meet, and my track's coach kid was a pretty talented cross-country runner, and he was also steeplechaser. Side note, I hate steeplechase, only slightly less than I hate hurdles. Running and jumping should not go together."
I have first-hand experience with that.
You know what's so funny? This is so funny. Randy ran the steeplechase, and I've always wanted to run the hurdles. So, sorry, Jen, I think that our tastes are a little bit different. Although, Randy's tastes are very different from everyone, considering his favorite is cross-country track and field off the bat.
Yeah, that's very true.
Anyway, I was in the ATR when someone leads the coach's kid in. He's scraped up, and he looks dazed. I asked him what happened, and it turns out he caught his trail leg on a barrier and hit the track face first. No one knows why he couldn't get his hands out to brace himself, but he went down like a ton of bricks. I ran him through some concussion tests, and it was obvious he had a concussion. I talked to his dad and asked if I could monitor him until practice was over, and then he'd take him to the ER. Yes, this was a thing we did. It's the only time in my life I had regretted not having a video camera. Over the course of the next 90 minutes, he had almost every sign and symptom of a concussion. It was textbook. He had a headache, photophobia, he was laughing, he was crying, he didn't know what day it was. I told him. He asked again. He kept insisting it was Monday. It was Thursday. He got mad. He got sad. He was anxious. Lucky for me, he saved the vomiting for when he was in the ER with his dad.
Well, I'm glad it was shared for the ER.
I know, really.
And you know what's funny is I've had a similar situation where one of our best steeplers was in a race, and this was maybe like a week or 2 before our conference meet, so big deal, clips the barrier. And if you're not familiar with steeplechase, the barriers aren't like normal hurdles. It's like a square, like pylon thing.
It's like a balance beam.
Yeah, like you can stand on it, right? So he jumped over it, clipped it with his knee, so now his knee's all bruised and banged up because he hit it hard, and then tumbles face first. So that added some nice stress because it was our best steepler that it's like, well, coach is going to freak out. And what's funny was I wasn't at this meet because it was a travel meet, and it was in the evening, so I get a call at almost 9 o'clock at night saying, "Hey, this happened." I'm like, oh no, that's not good. Like, but I can't, like, the medical staff that's covering the meets got him. We'll take a look tomorrow or Monday, whatever day it was.
And that's on healthy work-life balance.
Yep.
So people, of course, when you tell them you're an athletic trainer and then they actually realize, once they get past the phase that they think you're a personal trainer and then they realize you actually work with injuries, they always ask you like, "Oh, what's the craziest thing you've seen?" And, I've seen different musculoskeletal injuries. There were, some more gruesome than others, but I always go back to, I think I already shared this, but when I was an observation student, we had a football player who, and this is before I even knew anything about concussions, anything about injuries, anything about athletic training. Like, this is probably my first or second year as an observation student, getting my hours. And one of the football players had a concussion that went undetected, and I think he went back in and got hit again. And I just remember that his memory was literally 30 seconds.
Yeah, I remember this story.
And that took such a huge impact on me because, like, you see knee injuries, you see ankle injuries, and, it's a horrible thing, but when you're talking about someone's brain, and I just remember he kept asking, am I still dating my girlfriend? Like, did I get my bell rung? Are we home yet? Like, he kept asking the same things over and over and over again. And that was just so impactful on me because of the whole brain.
Yeah.
Getting injured. It's just not something that we really think about.
Yeah, exactly.
So this next one's anonymous.
All I see in it is D1 SEC track and field, which means this is going to be a good story.
I'm surprised at how many track and field stories we have in this concussion episode.
You see? It's the one sport you wouldn't think of having this issue tends to have this issue.
Okay, go for it.
So this was sent in by Anonymous. I was a second-year grad assistant working at a D1 SEC school with the track and field program, which, by the way, that's pretty high-level track and field. One day, an athlete came in wearing huge sunglasses asking for ice. The head AT was traveling with the first-year GA, and it was my turn to stay and work on rehabs in their absence. The situation seemed off, so I asked her to remove her glasses. The left side of her face was grossly swollen, ecchymosis surrounded an eye which was swollen shut. After a lot of hemming and hawing, I've never heard of that saying, by the way.
What, really?
I've never heard of that. The athlete eventually disclosed that she had been at a party where a male had thrown a bottle of alcohol at her face.
Oh my god.
That's terrible. She had sent a text message to the head AT with minimal information, of course, essentially stating that her face was swollen and asking, "Can I practice?" The head AT replied that she could with minimal inquiry. I felt uncomfortable disagreeing, but after a brief assessment, I had concern for a possible orbital blowout fracture, so I advised no participation. She was furious and shouted at me in front of the rest of the full-time staff. How, "You're just a GA," etc. I calmly walked into the AD's office and explained the situation. He took one look at her and agreed. 6 hours and a lot of imaging later, she was undergoing emergency surgery to correct an orbital blowout fracture with entrapment, a maxillary sinus fracture, and comminuted nasal bone fracture. Wow. There is a lot going on there.
I love that Anonymous was able to stand up for themselves.
Yeah, that's not easy, especially as a GA, but it's good that they had a supportive staff like that. Before I could contact the head to explain, the AT sent me several texts in a row, furious that I had made changes to the plan without consulting him/her and basically insinuating that I was done with the team. After all was said and done, the physicians had filled the head in on the situation. The head got pretty humble and thanked me for my attentiveness. Wow, that's a lot to unpack right there.
That head athletic trainer seems like a piece of work.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah, that's...
As a head athletic trainer, especially head athletic trainer with GAs, you should be supporting your staff. You should have their backs.
Or I think the biggest thing is don't jump to conclusions. I feel like the person in that situation just didn't get enough information to make, one, the decision for the athlete, and then also to not judge, I don't want to say judge, to make the decision for the athlete, and also to talking to the other AT like that. Like, it seems like just a lot of information wasn't shared.
I've never seen an orbital blowout fracture in person, but that's one thing. I know that's why I really don't want to work baseball, is face injuries, especially like baseball to the face injuries.
Ooh, yeah.
And when I first started working at the community college that I'm working hourly at right now, we both of the athletic trainers had left for the day, and they're like, okay, the only thing left on campus is baseball. Nothing's gonna happen. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And I knew as soon as they left, I was like, I am so scared that someone's gonna hit in the face.
Murphy's Law.
And guess what? Not like probably 15 minutes after they left, I got a call from the baseball field. Hey, we need an AT. Someone just got hit in the face with a ball.
Of course.
It was not an orbital blowout, luckily.
So just, again, back to the story, that was really good on Anonymous for standing their ground and going with what they saw, because that could be really hard for a young athletic trainer sometimes, especially when a more experienced athletic trainer says something else, to really stick with what you're seeing.
So last one of today, we have Nicolette with another audio gem.
Man, Nicolette, coming through.
If you guys want to send an audio file, 100% we're here for it. And if you actually just want to call us on the phone, we can record our call too, and you can tell your story on your own. So you don't have to cringily hear us read it and botch it up.
That might actually be better.
Okay, so here's Nicolette.
On my third clinical rotation as a student, I was assigned to a NAI soccer team in Southern California. So we were playing a very intense match, and one of our captains of the soccer team went up for a header, and simultaneously a soccer athlete from the other team tried to go up, hit the ball, but hit the back of our athlete's head, and our athlete tried to header the ball backwards, so they both slammed heads together. One hit the front and one hit the back, and both of them went down. Both of them collapsed on the floor, and as my supervising athletic trainer and I were running out, one of the players started seizing, and he's like, okay, you got him, the one who's seizing, and I'll get the other person with the concussion on the ground. So upon arriving to the scene, the athlete stopped seizing and was just bleeding from his head and mouth. And he was talking to me, however, he wasn't acting the same. And since I spent the whole semester, you definitely get to know your athletes, build that rapport. And he wasn't the same. So he was responding to all my questions, but it took him much longer, and his eyes were opening upon response to the question, not necessarily for pain or anything like that. After controlling the bleeding and getting the athlete more lucid, he was escorted off the field, and once we were off the field, he disclosed that he doesn't remember walking off the field or getting up. He kept asking what happened. It was very clear he had a serious concussion, and the seizure, petit mal seizure, may have contributed to that loss of consciousness or inability to remember the events. His parents were on the scene, and they took him to the hospital immediately. The match continued, and the opposing team's athlete had a concussion, but it wasn't as severe. He was not able to return, but our athlete was sent to the hospital. When he returned, he was diagnosed with a very severe concussion, busted lip, had to get stitches on his head, had to get 9 stitches on his head. And if anyone has tried to put steri strips on someone's head when they're a boy and have hair, you have not experienced how difficult it is. It was interesting. We just basically had to secure it until he immediately got to the hospital. He had a laceration on his head as well. He bit through the bottom part of his lip, so that was where the bleeding was coming from, not necessarily inside his mouth. A bit of a tough way to end the soccer year because he was a senior, but he was able to return and continue to play soccer just recreationally. So I guess just be prepared for, 2 athletes to go down and your preceptor or supervising athletic trainer to be like, okay, you get the harder one. Be prepared for anything. Welcome to athletic training.
Yeah, that sounds about right, I would say. The preceptor we'll deal with the easier one. You got that one. I think you got it.
I remember the first time that I hadn't run out on the field yet. It was my first rotation. And I remember there was one time where 2 of our own athletes went down they ran into each other. It wasn't our person and an opponent, no. 2 of our team members ran into each other and they both went down. And I remember being so mad because my preceptor went out to one and the opposing athletic trainer went out to the other one. And so then I was just I was like, finally, my chance to go run out and treat someone. And I ended up just running out with my preceptor because the opposing AT very, very nice that they had seen a need, but I was like, dang it, this was my chance. Also, speaking of, Nicolette said that it was very difficult for someone to steri-strip hair, which
very valid.
I've never tried to do it on short hair, but I know one of my preceptors said that one time someone had a head laceration and she ended up using their hair. It wasn't short hair. It wasn't like a short hair. She was able to like French braid it to hold the hair, the laceration together.
And I've heard of that, of people doing that where they basically like tie the hair to basically make a stitch.
Yeah. Which if you're just gonna send it for stitches, that's probably gonna hold up better than steri-strips.
With a sweaty athlete, hair in the way, big time.
Yeah. I remember I had to steri-strip someone's eyebrow and I took a picture of it. It was a really pretty clean wound. Someone elbowed him in the eyebrow during basketball. And it was a good thing I took a picture. He wanted it later, but so of course you always ask, like, hey, can I take a picture if you're going to take a picture? But he had a concussion as well. So later he didn't remember what happened. And so when I showed him the picture, he's like, whoa, that happened to me?
That's funny.
Yeah, you ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Our next episode's also on concussions. It's actually an interview with one of our physicians that we work closely with, Dr. Kateras.
He is amazing.
He is awesome. So we're super excited for you guys to hear that. And then upcoming story episodes, if you guys are new, we do every other, so odd episodes are sharing stories and even episodes are education. And our upcoming story ones are getting injured on the job, working with pregnant athletes, Halloween-themed stories such as superstitions.
Ooh, I'm excited for superstitions. I can't wait to hear what's out there.
Yeah, we want to know. We don't have any yet, I don't think. I don't know if we put this out there yet, so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we're looking for like anything Halloween related, like athletic training Halloween costumes or anything of the sort. And also new, we didn't talk about working with pregnant athletes. We have an awesome, actually like panel style interview coming up with Pam and Kelsey. That's super, 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 super exciting.
How many supers was in that?
Not enough. We're really, really excited about this. So to preface that, we want to hear your stories about you guys working with pregnant athletes. So if you guys want to comment on this episode, if you're watching on YouTube, then obviously it's easy to comment. But if you're not, then you can head over to our Facebook group. It's called AT Corner Community. It's also facebook.com/group/ATcornerpodcast. You just answer one membership question to get in. It's where did you hear about our podcast? And then you can join in the conversation with other listeners of the show.
Also, we haven't done this in a while, but if you're listening to Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. We like getting the feedback and seeing what we're doing well, seeing what we can improve on.
Yeah, and if you leave us a good review, then we'll share it on the show.
Yes, we will.
And if you leave us a bad review, then it will be there for everyone else to see.
And we will try and be better.
All right, Randy, I think we should wrap it up.
Thank you for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.